I see it's 9 a.m. on my timer here, but I think we're still waiting for a few people to. There we go. And I can't see into the room very well from this camera view. Can someone confirm we have everyone there?
We do.
Okay, great. And are in the room, are we ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And I see Dr. Adams. Okay, it looks like we have everyone. Anne, are we good on your end?
Absolutely, you're ready to start.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This meeting of the Board of Chiropractic Examiners is being held by teleconference. The date is Thursday, May 23rd, 2024, and the time is 9:01 a.m. The board's paramount responsibility is to protect the health, welfare, and safety of the public through licensure, education, engagement, and enforcement in chiropractic care. Members of the public may address the board during the public comment session. Public comments will also be taken on agenda items at the time the item is heard and prior to the board taking any action on said items. Those who would like to provide public comment will be limited to 3 minutes unless in the discretion of the board, circumstances require a longer period. Members of the public will not be permitted to yield their allotted time to other members of the public to make comments. Individuals may appear before the board to discuss items not on today's agenda. However, the board may not discuss or take action on these items except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Please be aware that this meeting is being recorded. Please turn off or silence all cell phones, and we will now take roll call. Ms. Cruz, would you please take roll?
Yes. And as I call your name and location, please confirm if there are any members of the public present. Dr. David Paris, 3455 Knighton Road, Redding, California.
Present at that address.
And any members of the public at your location?
No members of the public, sorry.
All right, thank you. Dr. Lawrence Adams, 101 Andrew Street, Sonoma, California.
Present and no public members present.
Thank you. Jeanette Cruz, 1625 North Market Boulevard, Suite N220, El Dorado Room, Sacramento, California. No members of the public present. Dr. Pamela Daniels, 1165 Park Avenue, San Jose, California.
Good morning, present and no members are present. Public members are present.
Thank you. Dr. Claudia Sandino, 1625 North Market Boulevard, Suite N220, El Dorado Room, Sacramento, California.
Good morning, and no public present.
And Mr. Raphael Sweet, 4100 West Alameda Avenue, 3rd floor, Burbank, California.
Good morning, present, no members of the public.
Thank you. All are present.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. We have a quorum. Moving to agenda item number 2, public comment for items not on the agenda. Want to inform members of the public that you may address the board at this time, and please note that identifying yourself is voluntary and your name will be recorded in the official minutes of the meeting if it is provided at the time of your comment. Moderator, can we please open this agenda item for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to mention a comment, an item that is not on the agenda, if you are connected through WebEx, you can look for the hand icon and click that. Usually that's along the bottom row. You can look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. We do have a couple of hand raises. Marcus Sturitz, I will be sending you a request to unmute your microphone. You're unmuted. You can go ahead, Marcus.
Good morning to everyone. First off, I'd like to say hi to Dr. Adams and hope his family's well. I know there's hard times. And then Dr. Sandino, how you doing? Good to see you. It's been a long time, Claudia. Anyway, say hi to some people. Dr. Paris, Dr. Daniel, don't leave you guys out. Good morning to you guys. Just some old friends. So I'm just responding to the CE new rules and regulations package that's been moving very slowly to get through. And I'm just looking for some clarification. I've contacted the board a few times and haven't really gotten answers I'm looking for. I'm looking for a clarification on a time frame for it. The latest I've heard is January 1st, 2025. Would like to know if there's going to be a grandfathering period, how that's all going to work, because there is tons of planning that goes on the provider side. It can't just be done the next day. So any insight on that would be great, where it's stuck, why it's taking so long, if it's stuck with the DCA or the OAL or actually still at the board. And if there's anything that the CE providers or any of the licensees can do to help push this through and forward, because it's important to a lot of people. We still have chiropractors traveling the world to come to California to take live CE and stuff like that we've talked about for the last couple of years. So that's just kind of my question, and also just the best avenue to communicate with either board members and or board executive officers, et cetera, in terms of communicating and what's the best forum to do that in, so we can get some answers and some updates. And again, I thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you for your comments, Dr. Strutz. And I think one thing that the agenda item 12 may help answer some of your questions, concerns, comments there. And also what we can do is I know we have shared contact information with you, so we'll have board staff reach out to you and answer some of your more specific questions. Thank you.
And we do have another hand raised from someone at WebEx. So I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. And you're unmuted. You can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. This is Marissa. I'm just making a request that the board, we appreciate your work and to continue to incorporate discussion of the animal chiropractic situation, especially with the upcoming, hopefully, licensing committee meetings coming up. So that was my only point. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa. Appreciate your comments, feedback. I think during the course of the meeting, I think that will, I think that's going to come up a couple times today. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
And there are no further requests for public comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see. Agenda item 3. Board chair report. Well, I think what I'd like to do is really give you an update on our recent activities and outreach since our last meeting, both formal and informal. So I took some notes here, so bear with me. I'm gonna run through. We kind of had, it ended up being kind of a lot actually once we went back and looked at it all. So, but before I start that, I want to say that, you know, there's opportunities for this, and if any board members or staff has an opportunity to engage, please reach out to us, and we can assist in in making that possible from wherever you're at. We all share different areas interprofessionally, but also with different groups and different leadership groups, and we also geographically are in different areas that sometimes makes these opportunities come up. So again, I encourage us all to get out there and engage with our stakeholders, which I think we've been doing, and I think some of this will kind of show that. So I'm going to go back to our kind of more formal stakeholder engagements, and we on March 1st we did I presented a 2-hour ethics continuing education at the Cal Cairo Spring Conference. And part of that update, kind of board update along with that, we answered a lot of questions and talked a lot about our upcoming CE regulation changes. So felt like that was very helpful for our licensees. And we took a lot of questions and feedback, and it was received really positively that we remain out there involved with Cal Cairo. On April 9th, Tuesday, April 9th, I believe, Dr. Adams, Ms. Walker, and I, we attended the Cal Cairo Legislative Day, and their pre-conference involves one CE hour, and we do, again, a board update. And we had a fairly robust discussion, and I think it generated a lot of really good questions and all the things that we hope that this engagement with our stakeholders leads to. So that was really valuable. And again, I can't thank Cal Cairo also. Kudos to them for allowing us these opportunities to engage and actually being engaged with us in reciprocation. So appreciate that. The week of May 2nd to the 5th, I attended the FCLB meeting, and it was their annual conference. And we have designating somebody to FCLB on our agenda today, as most of you know. But just as background, so the FCLB annual meeting is really a whole host of educational presentations focused around regulations and resources. So everything from ethics, boundary violations, strategic planning at the board level, board member orientation. We get updates from the field from most of the larger professional associations and group, both nationally and internationally. And we also get updates from services that we utilize, things like eBAS, PACE, and the newest for them is their RCSP program, which is their recognized chiropractic specialty program that's kind of in development. And I'm trying to see if we can pass forward some of the presentations that were given to us and maybe put them up on our website and for board members and the public to view. So I've requested that. And it also includes a day of an NBCE update, so all things education. And the update that I would give there is the main update from them is NBCE is going to a single testing site, and so they're gonna develop a very modern, probably one of the most modern testing sites, where they'll be able to video record Part 4, and they're gonna do all of the testing eventually in Greeley, Colorado. So that was one of their main updates for us. And let me see here. And Ms. Walker and I attended a stakeholder meeting on May 6th, and that was in regards to animal chiropractic, and Senator Bowe and her staff. And they are looking at potentially having some legislation around this, and it's in the early stages, I would say, of development and discussion. And it was really helpful, actually. In my sense, it was the first time we've had a meeting of all the chiropractic stakeholders, and I think partly what we got out of that too is that eventually we have to bring all the stakeholders together. So the vet board, ourselves, and all of our stakeholders like Cal Cairo and our licensees and other groups that have interest here. So we thought that was really helpful. Again, early stages of those discussions. On May 17th, Ms. Walker and I just did well, actually, I should say, Ms. Walker, thank you very much too. Ms. Walker's been really, really, really helpful and willing and excellent at, getting out and giving updates to our stakeholders. So on May 17th, we attended the Cal Cairo Executive Board meeting, and we did another BCE update for them. And otherwise, the informal meetings with stakeholders, ACA Engage in January, Parker in February. The feedback I'm getting there in the questions and concerns from licensees and other leadership group stakeholders is that they continue to revolve around CE and the fee increase, especially for those larger groups, and also the CE education regs. And so those continue to be big major priorities in the profession. And so I want to thank the board for kind of diligently working on those. Again, it's on our agenda today. And also Dr. Daniels, it's a really heavy lift in the licensing committee with those. And it's seemingly the most important thing, one of the most important things in the profession, at least when I get out and around. So thank you. And finally, meeting logistics for today. We're planning on taking a 15-minute break sometime between 10:30 and 11. And then also we're going to take a lunch hour from 1 to 2 today. And then in the afternoon, I think we'll see where we are on the agenda and what we may or may not need from there, but open to requests and suggestions there. So otherwise, that's all I have, and I'll field any questions from the board. Yeah. Okay. Hearing none.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
Question. In your meeting with about the what was it? Animal chiropractic discussion. Were there any other boards involved in the discussion?
At that meeting, it was just us. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, us and Senator Bowe and her office staff and Cal Cairo and some of their leadership, and including their executive director, and then they have a animal chiropractic committee, and so they had the leaders of that committee there present also. Yeah. And one thing
is anyone representing the animal community in that meeting? Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think one of the things we recognize is that moving forward, maybe these meetings happen along with the vet board, or they provide comment to us if as this potentially moves to a committee agenda, et cetera. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions from the board? Okay, hearing none. Moderator, can we open this agenda item for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the board chair's report, you may look for the hand icon at the bottom row of your screen. If you're on a mobile device, this might be behind the 3-dot other options. Click the hand to raise your hand, or you can look for the question mark icon and click that. Type the word comment in the text box and click send. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. Any comments on the board chair's report? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay. Moving to agenda item number 4, we're going to have a Department of Consumer Affairs update, and this may include updates on DCA's administrative services, human resources, enforcement, information technology, communications, and outreach, and legislative, regulatory, or policy matters. And I'd like to welcome back Ms. Judy Bucciarelli from the Office of Board and Bureau Relations and ask her to please provide us with an update from Department of Consumer Affairs. You have the floor, Ms. Bucciarelli.
Okay. All right, thank you. Good morning, board members. It's good to be with you again today. I'd also like to thank you for your service and dedication to protecting the consumers of California. To start my report, May 5th through May 11th was Public Service Recognition Week, and DCA honored the 3,000 departmental, board, and bureau employees dedicated to protecting California consumers. DCA would like to thank all employees for their service and contributions to consumer protection. Next, on April 30th, DCA hosted an in-person meeting with Agency Secretary Tamika Moss and executive leadership. The meeting served as an opportunity for DCA leaders to meet our new secretary and hear her vision and priorities for the business, consumer services, and housing agency and the department. Next, I have a licensee scam alert notice. DCA has learned of a recent increase in scams targeting licensees. Though the nature of the scams vary, they are similar in that they involve individuals falsely identifying themselves as board employees and telling the licensee they are under investigation. The scammers attempt to gather personal and/or financial information and may even demand payment. Boards are urged to be vigilant and proactive in providing licensees with tips on avoiding scams. Next, I have a diversity, equity, and inclusion update. On April 5th, DCA's DEI Steering Committee held its quarterly meeting. The committee reviewed and discussed the member application process, establishing subcommittees, and solicited input from committee members on how to expand language access, workforce development, and advance DEI activities in 2024. The next committee meeting will be held on July 26th. If you have any ideas that you would like the committee to consider, please share them with your executive officer. As a reminder, DCA's learning management system has many DEI-related training courses available. Next, last month, DCA's Office of Public Affairs staff participated in 2 Facebook Live events hosted by the Consulate of Mexico's Sacramento and Fresno offices during its Financial Education Week. Staff presented Get to Know DCA in Spanish and shared a broad overview of consumer and licensing information. In addition, DCA joined an in-person resource event with the Consulate of Mexico in Sacramento. Another Get to Know DCA virtual event was held with the Consulate of Mexico in San Bernardino on May 14th. The consulates have expressed interest in future event partnerships to share even more licensing and consumer resources. In the coming months, DCA will be developing consumer resources, outreach opportunities for all boards and bureaus to participate in. I look forward to sharing more information with you soon. Next, as the fiscal year comes to an end, please submit your travel expense claims as soon as possible and no later than Wednesday, June 7th. Claims submitted after this date will be processed. However, the State Controller's Office will not issue payments until after July 5th. All travel expenses and advances submitted for travel on or after July 1, 2024 will be processed for payment after the budget is signed. For any questions regarding travel claims, please contact Board and Bureau Relations. Next, as a reminder, board members must complete BMOT, which is Board Member Orientation Training, within 1 year of their appointment or reappointment. This training will be offered virtually on June 18th and again on October 22nd. Members can register for BMOT training via the Learning Management System. Now that the annual Form 700 filing period has ended, DCA and BBR would like to thank all board members and executive officers for helping us to achieve nearly 100% compliance. This concludes the DCA update, and if further information or assistance is needed with any of the items I've shared with you today, please feel free to reach out to Board and Bureau Relations. And at this time, I will hand it back to Dr. Paris, and I welcome any questions from the board.
Thank you, Ms. Bucciarelli. Let me open it to the board for any questions, comments.
Question? My question, let me go back to wrote it down, typed it down. For the scams, how is DCA and also BCE approaching those in terms of communicating to licensees? Is there like a shared post that we'd share on social media, or is it just general awareness?
So I don't have the answer to that. Maybe Kristen has some information.
DCA has a fraud page where they have information about all of the alerts, and then we have a banner on our website, and then we are working on some more targeted messaging. We have to be careful with what the messaging is because we don't want to divulge too much information, because one of the good things about the scams is like when the licensees do contact us, there are certain things about the letters that are just plain wrong that are right now red flags. We don't want them to get too sophisticated.
This is what you need to know. Ours looks exactly like this.
Right.
Okay.
So we do assure licensees. And we always encourage any licensee. It's like if you get just a contact out of the blue from the board supposedly threatening you, or that they're going to take your license, that's not how we operate. Contact us directly. That's the big message, and that's the message that's on the DCA website. So we are working on some updated content that we can release to licensees, but we do have to be cognizant that we don't inadvertently kind of give them the secret to having a better scam. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, great. And Ms. Bicciarelli, my understanding is this is across a lot of the healing arts boards. I think the PTs also had a, yeah. Okay. Okay, great. And I have one quick question. I recall I don't know that if the board member one of our board members was interested in attending some of the DEI training, and there was a login question and an access question. Dr. Daniels, was that you and I that were discussing that?
We weren't discussing the login. I know you and I were interested in the training, and I mentioned I fell upon my online thing and I did one of the online classes, but we were never notified. I'm not sure if Dr. Adams was interested as well, but I know you and I were. And so I haven't heard anything else.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll gather those resources and make sure they're accessible to the board. Thank you. Okay. Moderator, can we please open this agenda item for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone has any comments on the DCA report, you may look for the hand icon, click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment in the text box and click send. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. Are there any comments on the DCA report? And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 5, review and possible approval of July 20th, 23, October 19, 2023, and January 12, 24 board meeting minutes. These were still being edited and compiled, and we will defer this agenda item to our next meeting. Do we need a motion to do that? No. No?
No.
Okay. Well, let me open it for board discussion. Any question, comments from the board? Hearing none, I do have one question, and I'm wondering, and this may be for Ms. Walker. Is there ability to use, or are we using, or can we use, there's a lot of AI generated kind of meeting note-taking applications out there. Are we using that, or is anyone in the boards and bureaus utilizing that?
We're not currently. That's something that I would need to check with our Office of Information Services. That has crossed my mind as well as being a helpful tool for facilitating things like, at least drafting meeting minutes that can then be edited by staff. Let me check with the Office of Information Services and get back to you, because they have pretty strict security measures in place for our IT system. So let me report back to the board on that.
This is Sabina. I do know another board who does utilize a company that does their minutes for them initially. I'm of course that costs.
Yeah.
But that's the only other board I know that uses another service.
Okay, great.
We'll report back to the board on both.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Thank you, Sabina. I want to say too, that suggestion was from a conversation I had with Ms. Cruz. So thank you for bringing that up. I think if we can move forward there with that, I think that may be really helpful. This is kind of something we could work to make more efficient. So thank you for that. Okay, so we do not need a motion. Is that?
No.
Correct. Okay. So let's. Can we open this up for agenda item 5 for public comment, please?
Certainly. If anyone has any comment on the minutes, you may look for the hand icon in the bottom row. Click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon. Click that. Type the word comment in that text box and click send. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. Are there any comments on the minutes? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to agenda item 6, review and possible ratification of approved Doctor of Chiropractic license applications. And let me open this for any questions or discussion by the board.
Motion to accept license applications as outlined.
I second.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then call to a vote.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion from the board? Okay, hearing none. Moderator, can we please open this for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone has any comments on the ratification of approved license applications, you may look for the hand icon. Click that to raise your hand. You can look for the question mark icon, click that, and then type the word comment in the text box and click send. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. Any comments on the approved applications? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, hearing no comment. Ms. Cruz, could you please call the roll for the vote on the motion?
Dr. Parris?
Yes.
Dr. Adams?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz? Yes. Dr. Daniel?
Yes.
Dr. Sandino?
Yes.
Mr. Sweet?
I'll take it. Yes.
Thank you. What's it called? Motion passed.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Okay, motion passes. Moving to agenda item number 7. Review and possible ratification of approved continuing education provider applications. Let me open this item for questions or discussion by the board.
Motion to approve provider applications.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further comment, question, discussion by the board?
I think my question I have would just be more of what's it called, interview process. But is it normal for us to have a doctor's name or a doctor's name listed when it's a what's it called? What's not facility? What is that? A corporation. So is it normal for an individual to list their name as a corporation? So for Dr. Choi, that's the one I'm looking at.
Oh, you're asking if Dr. Choi is the name of, because it says provider name, and it's a provider status as a corporation. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I guess, okay. I just normally see the incorporated, I normally see the corporation name when it's there. Okay.
That possibly could be, Is that the name of the corporation?
That's what they listed on their application as the name of the corporation. If the board's comfortable approving it.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine approving it.
Staff will verify those since they've designated themselves as a corporation that they give us their true corporate name, and then it's not.
And I did see in the CE kind of document that we'll review later, there's so much more clarification in there. So kind of acknowledging that. Thank you. All right. But that does not change how I feel about it. So thank you.
Yeah, good catch. Thank you. Is there any other discussion, questions from the board? Okay, hearing none. Moderator, can we please open agenda item 7 for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone has any comment on the approved CE provider applications, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon and click that. Type the word comment into the text box and click send. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. Any comments on the provider applications? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, call to a vote.
Ms. Cruz, can you
Dr.
please? Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm a yes.
So I'll
I'm a
call
yes.
to a vote. Thank you. Dr. Adams?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz, yes. Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Dr. Sandino?
Yes.
And Mr. Sweet?
Yes.
All right, motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Okay. Moving to agenda item number 8. Discussion and selection of board members to serve as delegate and alternate delegate to the Federation of Chiropractic Licensing Boards, FCLB. And Ms. Walker, I believe I would turn this over to you to guide the board through the selection process.
Can I speak first?
So, of course.
Can I just congratulate you, Dr. Paris, on your election to the District 4 position?
Thank you.
I think that was, I think that's outstanding. I think things are going to move a lot more forward in that area now.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. And on behalf of staff as well, congratulations, Dr. Paris. So the purpose of this agenda item is very straightforward this morning. With Dr. Paris taking the role as the FCLB District 4 Director, it'd be appropriate for the board to designate a new delegate to the FCLB and then an alternate delegate. So currently, those roles was delegate was Dr. Paris and the alternate was Dr. Adams. This morning, we're just going to ask that the board consider making a motion to nominate 2 members, one as the delegate and one as the alternate delegate. As far as what those responsibilities of those roles are, is the delegate really serves as BCE's kind of representative before the FCLB. When there's things like the annual conference and at the district meeting, traditionally they would attend those meetings. The next meeting, assuming that we can get travel approval, is going to be in, I believe it's the first weekend of October in Scottsdale, Arizona. So that would be another kind of expectation of the position of the delegate or alternate delegate making plans to attend those meetings. They tend to be over the weekend, generally a Thursday through Sunday. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to the board to just discuss and consider nominating 2 members for both of those roles.
I'd like to be considered to be the delegate if that's okay with everyone.
I would make that nomination.
Yeah. Nominate. Yeah. Yes.
Dr. Adams, to delegate.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay. In just order of business, can we decide on nominations for both and do them all in one motion?
It's up to you. I'm assuming that there won't be a lot of controversial nominations here or discussion. You can do it as a slate, like a slate, if you will.
Yeah.
Or you can take them each separately as their own separate motion and a separate vote. It's up to you.
I think maybe it'll be efficient to do them as a slate. Is it any further discussion? Dr. Adams, would you like to say a few words? Anything about FCLB, your experience there, or I'll open it up for you if you'd like to.
No, I mean, having attended the meeting last year and see how the organization works, it's a great opportunity for us to be involved in the process and to add our insight. California is a very well-run state and very efficient in a lot of ways compared to other states. And so they can gain a lot of insight from us. We gain a lot of insight from them. Some of the states are, they're just kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of winging it because they don't have the structure in place that we have. So in some cases, they can move more nimbly than we can, but some of the safeguards and parameters and other aspects that we have in place make our board an effective board. And so I think it's a great organization, and I'm excited to support it.
Thank you. Are there any other discussion, questions about delegate nomination?
Question. I saw kind of as I was reading through the documents, I'm not sure if it was a requirement or a nice to have, of having at least being 5 years on our board. I don't think we have many of those. That was my kind of other concern. I wasn't sure if it was a requirement or a preference.
I would clarify. I think the language is. I'd have to see what we're referring to specifically, but I think that language specifically refers to the ability to continue to serve with FCLB within 5 years of your board service. For example, Dr. McLean was our District 4 delegate last year, even after her board service. I believe, Ms. Walker, does that sound correct?
So under one,
I'm looking on page 2, at the bottom for article definition, section 7 for definition of delegate.
Yeah, so a delegate, a current board member is considered a fellow for purposes of that.
Okay.
So they're eligible for the eligibility is a current board member or someone who's been on the board in the previous 5 years.
Got it. Okay.
DCE always uses current board members as the delegate and the alternate delegate.
Okay.
We don't nominate.
I was just kind of like, I was like, that leaves you two again, so I don't know.
So all board members are eligible for that.
My governance side is coming out, so thank you.
Is there any other interest or self-nomination for delegate from the board members? No other nominations. Okay.
I'd be interested. I would be interested.
As delegate?
Not delegate, the alternate.
Oh.
Sorry. Are we just talking delegate? I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thought we were doing a slate.
Yeah, the slate. We'll move on to, I was just clearing the path out of delegate. So thank you for that. Is there any other interest as alternate delegate? Okay. Hearing none, I would be happy to nominate Dr. Sandino as alternate delegate to the Federation of Chiropractic Licensing Boards.
Whoops, I had none muted. I'll second that.
Thank you. Any discussion from the board? Okay. Well, hearing none, thank you, Dr. Sandino, for volunteering. I think it's a wonderful experience, and I think it's extremely valuable to the profession. And I think it brings a lot of there's a lot of exchange of learning and information that goes on that's really important to the regulatory role we play here. So I'm happy to have you volunteer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And let's see, before we go to a vote, and if hearing no further comment or questions, moderator, can we open this agenda item for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the delegates, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box, then click send. And each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. Any comments on the delegates? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Cruz, would you please call the roll for the vote on the motion being to elect Dr. Adams to the delegate to FCLB and Dr. Sandino as the alternate delegate to FCLB.
All right. So we'll start with Dr. Paris.
Yes.
Dr. Adams.
Yes.
Ms. Cruz, yes. Dr. Daniels.
Yes.
Dr. Santino.
Yes.
Mr. Sweet.
Yes.
All right. Motion passed.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving to agenda item 9, the executive officer's report and updates, and I will turn it over to Ms. Walker.
Sure, thank you. Just going to highlight a few items this morning as part of my update. The first of which is, we finalized the committee assignments for 2024. There's been a few shifts and changes, most notably Dr. Adams taking the position of CE committee chair, and then Mr. Sweet taking the position of enforcement committee chair, and then Dr. Paris and Dr. Sandino moving to the government public affairs committee. We also still have we've designated one opening on the licensing committee in case we happen to get a 7th board member appointed to the board. We have room to place that member without having to make further adjustments for the remainder of the year. Looking at the board meeting calendar, we're just about a little under 60 days out from our next meeting, so it's already time for us to begin planning for our next board meeting. I'd say on the staff side, we have a significant amount of staff workload that we have geared up or that we're working towards that we can bring forward to really fill out a committee agenda or a board meeting agenda come July. So, and then we also now have the discussion on animal chiropractic that needs to take place just due to legislative deadlines and the need to bring that discussion forward to the board in July. So I am proposing that as far as with committee meetings, we have a licensing committee meeting scheduled for June 7th. We may need to slightly adjust that date or take it into a working group to discuss with the animal chiropractic folks. But we do have quite a bit of regulatory proposals that we can gear up for that July meeting along with text and then those discussions. So just putting that out there that staff is working on getting that agenda ready. As far as with communication with the committee chairs, we're likely going to be proposing that we look at late July, early August, and then going into September for us to have those committee meetings, because we do have a number of additional regulatory proposals that need to go through at the committee level that require staff preparation time for us to get those materials ready and up for discussion. So just wanted to put that on everyone's kind of radar there as far as upcoming dates. Any questions before I move on from that?
And sorry, you may have mentioned it. Did the governance committee, are we just going to do a plan for that offline?
We will, we'll be in touch with each of the committee chairs to plan for it offline. My initial just kind of thought is if we can keep the licensing committee
focus between now and July, because we have the animal chiropractic and the chiropractic college curriculum regulations that we've made quite a bit of headway on. So kind of focus on that between now and July, and then staff has a lot of other proposals that I'll get into later in my update that need to go forward as well. And then plan for committee meetings, whether it be late July or into August and September, to gear up for our October board meeting.
Thank you.
There.
My only comment would be that I just want to thank all the board members for their flexibility and their willingness to engage, and I really especially appreciate our public members' involvement and willingness to chair committees and everybody else's flexibility here. So thank you. I think we have a great committee structure. I really like the way this worked out this year, and I think we'll be back into the productivity that we saw last year very soon here. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Ms. Walker, for keeping that moving.
Sure, you're welcome. Few other items for me to highlight. As far as a business modernization project and our implementation of the Connect system is still moving forward. We did have, unfortunately, from the Office of Information Services, we did have another project manager from OIS that departed. So the leadership of the project is kind of continually in flux. So we're adjusting with that. As far as on the vendor side, they made some significant progress in developing our upgrade to the newest version of the system that the additional DCA boards are already on. We were part of the first cohort, so they used us as kind of the test case for moving that first cohort onto the newer version of the platform that the second cohort is using. So we're currently in the testing phase of that right now. Our representative from OAS has done some significant testing. And then over the next coming weeks, staff will be doing some additional testing as well with the transition to that new platform planned for early this summer. That's what I have to report on Connect. The other portion of Connect is in light of some of the budget shifts and the state budget situation, they required that we adjust some of our priorities to finish some of the development work on some of the outstanding items that we had for tickets for the Connect system. We've mainly worked through all of those, so we're now back to focusing on our primary objective being to get the continuing education functionality implemented in the system, similar to what the acupuncture board already has. Any questions on Connect? I know I kind of tend to cover some of the same, but just if there's any questions. As far as on the licensing side, we've been doing some work with DCA's Office of Professional Examination Services. They've been working on the development of our updated occupational analysis of the chiropractic profession. That report is expected to be ready later this year. OPES is also continuing to support us with their ongoing California Chiropractic Law Examination, the CCLE exam development. And we've now are working with them for them to also do a validation study of the national boards, parts 1 through 4, and the PT exam. So that's another periodic check that OPES does to ensure the validity of that national exam. It's been about 5 years since the last one, so they're now gearing up to do that effort again for us this upcoming fiscal year.
Question on that?
Yeah.
It sounds like a huge effort. Is there dedicated staff to that, or is it more of kind of them doing the analysis and just the team consulting? I'm just wondering, like, how much staff time is this effort taking, because there's so much going on?
It requires some staff time, but the majority of that effort is taken under by the analysts from OPES, that office, as well as subject matter experts from the chiropractic profession. So we do thank and appreciate all of the volunteers that spend their time serving subject matter experts for that analysis. Wanted to cover as well a few personnel updates. So we did welcome a new special investigator in early April to our staff. And then we're also in the final phase of the hiring process for 3 positions, actually. We have an office technician position, the 3rd special investigator position, and the manager of the enforcement unit. Those are all at the final hiring phase. We expect to have those people in place in June, because we are very close there. And then looking a little bit further out into the summer, we're planning to fill an additional 3 positions, 2 analysts and 1 program technician to support the licensing program.
Only other things I really wanted to highlight as far as that you would find within my memo is, I mean, looking at the statistics, they're really what is to be expected when we're looking at this data. You know, looking at our licensing program, it's pretty much comparable to what we've been seeing. We are still continuing to see that increase in satellite certificates, primarily driven by a lot of the different locations for the QME programs. We're still continuing to get a high volume of applications with licensees that have multiple locations through which they're conducting those evaluations. Our DC licenses issued has been pretty steady over the past few years. And then we are still just continuing to see that slight decline in the number of licensees that are renewing and maintaining licensure from year to year. As far as enforcement, the enforcement program's been very busy. We've continued to receive kind of comparable number of complaints, putting a lot of focus on closing investigations. You see just about July 1 of 2023, we're at 511 pending complaints. We've got that number back down under 400, and we really have a goal of trying to get that closer to 300 by the time we close out this fiscal year. We've done a lot in terms of completing the investigation phase, and we've sent quite a bit of work to our experts to render their reports. So we are anticipating that a lot of additional closures as we go into the end of the fiscal year. We've made a little bit more use of our cite and fine program. I expect that to increase as we go into next fiscal year as we work through some of those cases. And we've also had 2 fiscal years back is when we had the very high volume at the Attorney General's office. We had we had the high caseload. We also had significant costs at the Attorney General's office. Those have leveled off, and this is more of a normal year for us. So we have a healthy volume of Attorney General cases. We've got about a little over 50 pending. We don't anticipate that to spike like it did a few years ago. We anticipate that to be relatively steady going into the next fiscal year. Wanted to then also just highlight some of the proposed regulations that we have within my report. We have 21. We have 7 of them that are complete for purposes of the board that we have text, and then it's on staff to write the justification and the regulatory package so we can get that through OAL. Our regulatory counsel here with us today, Stephen Vong, he's been very, very helpful in assisting board staff in getting some of those proposals moving and getting that documentation done so we can get them to the Office of Administrative Law. We've highlighted 3, or actually 4, that are real priorities for the summer. The first of which, of course, is the continuing education proposal, which we'll discuss under agenda item 12. We also want to get that licensee telephone number, email address, and address of record updates done. That's a relatively simple proposal. And then 2 that are going to provide us with additional tools and enforcement, and that's the proposals about sexual contact with a patient and required actions against registered sex offenders, and then the additional tool for discipline by another jurisdiction and licensee reporting requirements. So we're planning to get those off to OAL over the summer. Ideally, we can get them to a point where the board's reviewing and responding to written comments on the October board meeting. And then we're going to have those other 3 proposals probably about a quarter behind that. When you look at the concept phase, you'll notice that I did move within the concept phase, the licensing and regulatory fees. We were initially planning to try to pursue that as a Section 100 change, which is a very relatively simple change through the Office of Administrative Law, where we just we file the change and say, the statute changed, therefore we're going to change this regulation, and it goes into effect, I believe it's upon filing or 30 days after. Unfortunately, with the way that our statute is written, it does still give the board some discretion in setting fee amounts. So it says, the fee amount is a specific amount unless the board adopts a lower rate. So by having that language in there and the board's discretion, we have to go through the regular rulemaking process to make those updates, because we just have to justify why the board selected the statutory fee amount versus exercising discretion to lower it. So we're going to be working on that proposal. Ideally, we can potentially bring something forward in July, but if not, we're looking at the October board meeting. But that was moved from previously being at production level back down into concept, because it is going to require a board vote and discussion. We also had at the last licensing committee meeting a motion as far as with moving forward a proposal about prohibiting the activities that can be performed by the holder of an inactive license. We're working through some issues with the text there as far as clarity, and also making sure we don't have any duplication in the text with other regulations. We're working through that with council with the plan to bring it forward in July. Any questions from the board on regulations before I move to other portions of my update.
Ms. Walker, could you walk me through quickly the continuing ed, the course apps received in Q1 and then Q3, there was a delta change of about 100, and then the course apps approved were relatively the same. Do you have any information on the delta change between Q1, Q3? Is that usual, or what's your take on that?
So the providers tend to file their courses with us annually, and we tend to receive a very high volume at the end of the year between October and December. And then also for those that are operating on a fiscal year, we would get them at that point. As far as the approvals, that's when it creates a significant workload for staff. So staff isn't able to keep up with approving them as fast as they're coming in. So you'll see that discrepancy where they're catching up, because we've got in Q1 we received significantly more than what were approved, but then there's a little bit of a catch up there in Q2 and it leveled back off in Q3.
And then I think Dr. Adams mentioned it a while ago. Is there anything that board members can assist with as far as getting staff up to date with how to approve as far as from a DC perspective, or is it just number of staff, or is it the lack of sort of background?
So the biggest challenge that we encounter with the CE course applications is actually just we tend to receive a lot of applications that are very vague and they lack any detail as far as what the presenter or what the instructor is actually planning to present as part of the course. So there's a lot of back and forth with staff trying to get more details so that we can understand what it is they're actually planning to present so that we can get enough information to approve. We do informally, we will send, if something seems questionable or it has to do with the actual content, we'll vet those through our licensee board members. But more often than not, the problem is actually more administrative in nature. They're not giving us enough detail in those course applications. And that's one of the benefits to our regulations that we have that we're going to be putting forward is they're much more clear and there's a lot more detail to what the expectation is as far as filing a course application, the supporting documentation that needs to be included compared to the vague regulations that we have now. So we expect that problem to be somewhat resolved as the providers kind of get used to the new process and providing more information up front to substantiate a course.
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying that the lack of information provided is due to our vague form and not from on their side?
It's both. So the regulation itself doesn't lay out very cleanly all of the information that is needed for something to be considered a complete application. There's not a lot of specificity there in the regulation, but then when they do submit something like an outline, we're seeing something where it'll say something like group discussion 1 hour, discussing what, and giving us detail, because it might have some learning objectives for maybe the course, but it's not breaking down specifically the content to the degree that we can approve it. So that's what we're seeing is just a very kind of bare bones outline most of the time, and we have to go back and try to get additional information from the provider so we can substantiate what it is they're even planning to teach and what the takeaways would be.
Is it possible, or would it be helpful to create sort of a worksheet for the providers that is not their application, that clearly sort of walks them through, like, did you answer this question in this way? This is what we're looking for. This is an example.
Like a supplemental guide?
Yeah.
For frequently asked questions.
FAQs, something, yeah.
Yeah, that's we've actually tasked Dixie with putting some of that together. So she's working with Saida to put together kind of the common issues and just kind of what we want providers to know so we can share that information. The application form itself has a check sheet, but even though it has a check sheet, we don't always get everything on that list. But
no, I feel like,
more so giving.
I just feel like people need if you're having that much problem, I just feel like clearly it's not being understood. So I feel like there's such a delay and lack of information. And to me, I just hear staff hours of going back and forth versus, let's just get the information, at least 90% of it on the first time. And if they're not understanding, they need examples or they need I call it a worksheet. Ms. Cruz, called it a supplemental. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, and we are working on those. And then another idea that we had as well was being able to do, whether it be on a Friday or something, but start implementing something to the effect of having open calls to where providers can jump on and just ask us direct questions and get answers. And we could potentially record those and post them for viewing later on. But basically doing staff presentations on what we are looking for and what, a good application versus a deficient application.
Last question. I mean, do we hear from providers listening maybe that there's are they just not understanding? Do they have specific, ideas that would help them fill out the application, or is it just sort of?
We see the issue the most often with more so when they're doing more of a CE event than the providers that provide regular education courses. They've got it pretty much dialed in because they've got an entire workload of courses with various dates and different programs that they're offering throughout the year. It's more so when we have events and they have a specific speaker lined up. It's usually between trying to coordinate for that provider to get all the information they need out of the speaker to be able to get the approval. So a lot of the problem isn't necessarily with the provider, it's the provider then coordinating with the instructor to get everything that we need for us to be able to approve their presentation.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure, you're welcome.
I would have just a quick comment. Sorry, whoever I interrupted, excuse me. I think the open office hours is a wonderful idea. And I think our licensees and stakeholders in continuing ed and maybe even other areas would highly appreciate the opportunity to have a known regular open channel with somebody from the board staff that could just answer some of those basic questions. So if I could encourage that we continue to, work on that idea, I think it would be much appreciated. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, thank you. And then if I could just ask that the meeting moderator display our fund condition for a very brief budget update.
And as a note, users may zoom in and scroll up and down by using the controls at the top of their WebEx screen.
Thank you. So I'm going to keep the budget update's going to be very brief. In summary, as far as looking at our budget compared to the state budget, we're always not quite aligned, because in a time when the California state budget was very healthy with surpluses was a few years back when we were facing deficits and we had to go and get the new fee language and implement different fees for our program. So we've now done that, and then also been very conservative in our spending over the last few fiscal years, so that we were able to get to a point where our fund is relatively healthy. We have 6 months in reserve right now, but keeping in mind that as we're planning further out, we are going to be increasing our spending on employee salaries and benefits. So that's where we're going to see the increase. As far as looking at this projection that we have here, when you look at expenditures for last fiscal year, we were just over $4 million. This fiscal year, we're actually even projected to be lower than that. We're looking at about 3.8. It might come in closer to $4 million. But then when they start planning for our full budget allotment, that's when we start getting closer into the 6. So there's a big gap there. I'm anticipating to be around 5 when we get to next fiscal year, because that decrease there is a result of mainly 2 things. One is savings in staff due to some of our vacancies, but the other major saving point is in our Attorney General budget. We had a $900,000 budget for the Attorney General's office, and we're really anticipating to spend about $350,000 for this fiscal year. So we've got a very healthy reserve there that is not being spent. And then when you look into the next year out, that's when it's, again, accounting for us spending that full amount and full staffing. When I look at next fiscal year, I'm still anticipating somewhere in the middle of the AG budget. And then as far as staffing, we plan to have almost all positions filled. We may have 1 or 2 vacancies just to preserve a little bit of cost, because at this point, the governor released his May revision for the budget, but it hasn't yet trickled down to our programs as far as implementation and what they're going to force us to cut. But the word is just under 8% of state operating costs, and they are looking at vacancies for potential cost savings for a few fiscal years out. So planning ahead for that, we've looked at our few remaining vacancies and kind of earmarked ones that we could potentially live without if we had to, and then also kind of just being mindful of where we can continue cutting to try to keep that number down as much as possible. The big challenge that we have for staff is, unfortunately, our equipment is continually aging, and we do need to take a look at when it comes to printing costs. We spend a lot of money on printing licenses, mailing licenses. It's very expensive, so looking at solutions to where we can get more of a postcard in lieu of printing those expensive mailing packets. Things like that is what we're going to be looking into for the few fiscal years out. So, but overall, the message as far as the budget, it's healthy. It's just you're still going to continue to see that decline in the years out, just due to, one, it's assuming that we spend the full budget, which we historically do not, and then two, just rising costs from year to year. They have that just incremental cost built in as you go further out. I believe it's assuming a 2% or 3% growth beginning the next year. So, any questions from the board as far as our budget?
Yeah, I have a quick question on that. Thank you for that update. You mentioned that you're projecting that we'll spend a lot less on the AG budget next year. So I think you said 300,000 of the 900,000 budget. Is that right?
Correct. So for this fiscal year, we're projected to spend around 350,000 of our $900,000 budget for the Attorney General's office.
Okay, and why?
And then
why
next year we're probably.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just curious as to why we're able to get by on so much less than is budgeted. Are we using our enforcement capabilities with the Attorney General's office?
We are. We're using them wisely and efficiently. That's one of the line items that's historically been large for the board. It's been when, going back probably, 5 to 10 years back, the board has always had a very large AG budget that it historically underspends. It was actually 2 years back when we overspent that budget, which was the first time in years that we'd ever even needed that full budget. So it's more for planning just in case it's needed. But we are still using our resources effectively and sending cases to the AG's office when needed.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Walker, I had a question. So I understand the projections and they look good. It's nice that we're, getting where we need to be fiscally. One of my concerns is that we see this trend down in our licensees, though, in the state. And that, if I'm reading it correctly, did I read that right? That our renewals were at just under 10,000?
You did. It's only through the middle of May, so we do have a month and a half more of receipts to receive. But yeah, as of through May, it was in the 9,000.
So, based on your experience, are we going to get, are we going to be back up close to the 12,000 number in the next bit of time, or are we going to be substantially lower than we were? Anyway, my question is that if we're kind of on this trajectory down, how does that going forward? What does that look like? Because you're talking about hiring more staff and us having less licensees that we're going to be getting that revenue from. Is that seems like not a good glide path?
That's correct. So as far as looking at the board's timelines, we're going to be heading into sunset review again in 2026, which will be here before we know it, with a report due to the legislature at the end of 2025. Part of that sunset review submittal is going to be a required fiscal analysis of our fund and the health of our fund, and recommendations to the legislature on where we go as far as fees. So that's a study that's going to be largely driven through the Government Public Affairs Committee that we'll be working on later this year and into next year, so we have those recommendations. As far as the budget itself, we're healthy to get through sunset, but we're going to have some recommendations and suggestions on how to really structure this going into the next, after that sunset, what the next 4 years and beyond ends up looking like. We've got health there as far as to sustain us through our sunset review period with no problem. We don't need to be going to the legislature asking for more money or going through the regulatory process to increase fees at this point. But we are going to have to do a really in-depth analysis of really just the structure and where we're getting our funding when we start going for the legislature at the sunset review. So that's where it's going to get us. And then as we've heard a lot, and we'll talk about a little bit in agenda item 12, even when it comes to things like the CE fees, there's been just a lot of discussion and a lot of feedback as far as what those costs are. We've got it based on our last fee study. We're doing another fee study, and then we're going to have those recommendations to come forward after that. So I guess my message isn't that it's not all bright and that we're, it's amazing, because when you look at the months in reserve, we do see that decline when we want to see an increase. But at the same time, we're stable enough to get us through sunset and get us where we need to be to take action further in the future and hopefully alleviate, some of the other stressors that are going on with licensees when it comes to just general inflation. Luckily, we aren't having to pass something on to them, on top of it this year.
Have you also noted with the changes in the CE fees that went in, gosh, I guess it's been about a year and a half now. Have we noticed a decrease in our revenue from CE?
The revenue is increased, but the number of applications has decreased, because the revenue with the fee amount going up so substantially, we do have more revenue for funding our CE program, but we did get a reduced number of applications. We're expecting that to be partially offset through the new regulations when we extend that approval period to 3 years, because you're going to get basically 3 times the value for your money. But we did observe that decrease in course applications.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Appreciate it.
And at least what I'm hearing Dr. Adams almost alluding to is that, is there a point of diminishing returns of what is the point of decreased, renewals that, even with the fee increase, we don't get. So I think that there's a point, I'm not saying we calculate it today, but I'm sure that there's a point of diminishing returns where there's a number of, and whatever that number is, we should kind of keep our eye out for whatever number. Once we get down to that number, that's when, that point of when a flag should go up. But correct. My understanding is we're not there right now.
You're correct. Yes, we're not there. We're at a point where at the scale that the renewals are going down, it's not too steady it's not too quickly that we can't fund our program. So we're in a healthy spot. We also do have the statute that gives us authority, which, like I said, we're not planning to do, but that we do have authority to raise fees if needed to, sustain the board's fund for a long period of time. It's really just going to be more of heading into when we start getting to the sunset review period, is looking at where our funding is coming from. And the majority of it is through the DC license renewal fee, and setting a fee amount that sustains the board and keeping in track the historical, or that kind of projected trend of continuing to diminish in the future. Ideally it would grow, but if it's not, we still need to make sure we have enough funding with that decrease.
Well, I know we added that provision that allowed us to go, I think it was up to 500 if we had to. So I think we're good in that regard. I don't think we're going to lose that many licensees, but it's a reality that it is going down, and every one that goes down is decreased revenue, and we do have costs going up. Obviously, you're going to hire staff and salaries go up, and that's just the nature of the beast. I have nothing further.
And that concludes my update, if there's no other questions.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Walker. Are there any other questions or discussion by the board members? Okay. Hearing none. Moderator, would you please open agenda item 9, Executive Officers Report and Updates for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the Executive Officer Report, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And we do have a raised hand from Marcus Stretz. And again, each speaker has 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. And Marcus, I'm going to send you a request to unmute. And there you go, you're unmuted.
Thank you. I just would like some clarification on the last report where the CE applications for individual seminars was that in the renewal fees? Not clear on that. And then my second question would be, or comment, would be for the second and third year, if there's no fee, that's great. And then for the fourth year, there's supposed to be a renewal fee for a class. And my question is, have we determined how much that's going to be? Is that going to be still the $116 per hour? Or is that going to be a reduced fee because it's the same class over and over and over again to help staff get through that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. Appreciate that.
And I do not see any further requests for comment. Shall I close the public comment feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then Dr. Paris, would you like me to respond or clarify those few points, or?
Yes, please.
Okay, just to clarify in response to the first question. So as far as the number of course applications and then the revenue, the number of course applications received has decreased, but the total revenue that the board has received in terms of course application fees has increased due to that shift in the fee. We were generally, I don't want to quote a number off the top of my head, but we were historically around $100,000 a year for the CE program through those application fees. We're closer into, I believe it's like the mid 300,000 as far as revenue. But when you look at the course application numbers, they are down. So just wanted to make that clarification in responding, to clarify my report.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Appreciate that. Are there any other discussion questions from the board? Okay. Hearing none, thank you, Ms. Walker, for a very detailed report. Moving to agenda item 10, licensing committee report, and I would turn it over to Dr. Daniels to provide an update on licensing committee.
Great, thank you. So the three main things that we're sort of working on right now are the definition for filing of practice and trying to streamline that and take care of the public as far as for those mobile events and fairs. And so we've had many conversations about defining what that is. And so that's pretty much ready for staff to write some regulatory language around that. So we're waiting for that. Also, we worked on the definition of inactive license, and I think Ms. Walker mentioned it. We need to create the language so that it's clear and it passes through the process. And so they're working on that as well. The major, I think, discussions for both of those topics have been handled. And then the other one is the California curriculum. We met in a work group as well on May 2nd, and we provided staff with copious notes as far as dealing with let me give a little background. I mean, most of you know, so we have the Chiropractic Act 1922. And then we've had some regulation to define that act, and it's very prescriptive, and it's been hindering the colleges. So we're in process of trying to remove most of those prescriptions for colleges to let them be more flexible and more contemporary. But we do have a few areas where we're constrained by the act. And so we provided copious notes to them of how to take the somewhat archaic terms or how to blend them into what CCE is requiring, and how to make those terms more contemporary and how to define them as far as some of the ones are histology, pharmacology, psychiatry, dermatology. Those are in our act that we need to keep as far as the curriculum. So I feel like most of the heavy lifting has been done. It just really is in the phase of, hopefully staff can really kind of move the language forward, because my feel is that it's going to take a couple rounds of looking at it to make sure that it passes through OAL and all that process. So those are the three main ones. We've made progress, but I mean, my goal would be to get those done, by the next meeting, but that's not going to happen. So we can wish. So, and then so once we get those done, in the background, we have been doing some work on reciprocity. That's, another big issue. And then Marissa, to answer you, I did request to speak with the other veterinary boards and stuff as far as the animal chiropractic, and kind of am waiting to be able to have those conversations with those people. So it's on our list. And so that's sort of the next thing. And then there's a couple small items which you see in your packet that are, straightforward, and Ms. Walker mentioned them. So I think that's pretty much it. And does anybody have any questions?
Actually, I wanted to add something. I think a big part of the more recent discussions we've had in the licensing committee, and I think you addressed all the points very clearly. But what I want to add on is that kind of in between addressing the duplicate terms, making sure we're flexible and even modernizing the terms, there is this balance we're also trying to address with what's important to consumers of California as well, right? Of just kind of acknowledging that this is something that is not just used in California, but something that's going to be recognized across, other states. That too, but I just want to address, there's this kind of continual balance we have to do do we name this, do we name that? And so there's a lot of, I don't want to call it scrutiny, but there's kind of very deliberate conversations happening.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Cruz. Yeah, so there's, I think a little bit of pushback, a little criticism. We don't need this, we don't need that, but people need to realize we have some things that are in the act that just are not going to change right now until we go through a legislative process. And, a bunch of people that think that's not really available to us. So the best, I think the immediate thing that we are working on, which Ms. Cruz mentioned, is removing the redundancy, letting CCE do their thing, relying on them to do the heavy lifting and going by their guidelines, and allowing the schools. They spend a lot of time with this attendance. And, when you look at the numbers, it's a lot of money and it's a lot of time. So we're looking at removing those. And, as I've mentioned before, there's literature to support not having attendance. So, all those discussions have happened. And as Ms. Cruz pointed out, it is trying to, maintain the balance of what we need to have, but also, as we talked about, California is a very large state, and we have a very diverse group of residents. And so what might be good for Iowa may not be good for California. What might be good for Florida may not be good for California. So it is emphasizing what do the stakeholders of California need and expect of their chiropractor, and the standard of care, and also really trying to move stuff out of that regulatory language so the schools can do their thing. So thank you, Ms. Cruz. That's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels. Any further questions, discussion from the board? And Dr. Daniels, this is a really heavy lift, and I know I say that all the time, but it truly is. And my truest sense is that the thing that I hear the most, or get curbsided or pulled aside, or have stakeholders, licensees, other professional organizations in the profession and outside of our profession contact me about, seems to be this issue. And so, I think I really appreciate even the idea that there's some expediency to result, getting this moving forward, like you said, hopefully at the next meeting. So really appreciate that. I think the profession and our stakeholders appreciate that too. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been on, there was one approved in 2020. It sort of sat on the desk, but when I looked at it and talked with this Ms. Walker, it probably wouldn't have passed through as far as with the way the language was written. So I feel like, it's very close. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're right there. And I think it's been well considered too. I think you've become a subject matter expert in this. So I really appreciate that. Our subject matter expert in this for the board. So thank you. Hearing no further comment question, moderator, can we please open agenda item 10, licensing committee report for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the licensing committee report, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box there and click send. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. Are there any comments on the licensing committee report? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving to agenda item 11, review, discussion, possible action on legislation related to the board, the chiropractic profession, DCA, and or other healing arts boards. I will turn it over to Ms. Walker to provide the staff report on this agenda item.
Sure, thank you. So we're going to probably briskly move through a lot of these bills. There's 2 substantive ones that really like to take some time to discuss with the board, and then a few others that it's mainly updates. So first, before I dive in, there's legislation constantly changing. So the agenda item 11B there, AB 2412 Reyes, that bill is dead. We put it on the agenda just to make the board aware that they were looking at potentially starting to regulate body contouring. We occasionally see it more in enforcement. It primarily affects more the medical board and the board of barbering and cosmetology, but occasionally we see some of our licensees as well that are involved in those types of businesses. But that bill missed a key deadline to get out of, I believe it was committee. So that bill is now dead. So we don't need to discuss that one. And a second bill that was actually kind of interest to the board, but SB 1067, Smallwood Cuevas, that was the bill that would require an expedited licensure process for medically underserved areas or populations. The board was actually just recently removed from the bill through amendments on May 16th. So no further need to discuss that bill as well, because it no longer affects this program. So starting with the first one, 11A, this is just informational. There's AB 2269 with Flora. It's been referred to the Senate Business and Professions and Economic Development Committee and scheduled to be heard on June 10th. So existing law prohibits a public board member from having a specified employment or contractual relationship with a licensee of that board within the preceding 5 years of the appointment, unless it does not constitute more than 2% of the licensee's practice or business. What this bill would do is reduce that time frame to 3 years, but then eliminate that 2% exemption. Staff recommends that the board watch the bill. No comments. I'm just going to, if it's okay with the board, I'm going to, on the ones with the staff recommendation to watch, unless there's a need or a thought from the board to want to take a position, I'm just going to scroll to the, or I'll just move to the next one. So for agenda item 11C, that's AB 2862 Gibson, Department of Consumer Affairs, African American applicants. So this bill just passed the assembly yesterday and was ordered to the Senate, pending assignment to a committee. What this bill would do is require the board to prioritize African American applicants seeking licenses, especially applicants who are descended from a person enslaved in the United States. And that is the entirety of the bill itself. So with staff looking at that bill, we've got a relatively high estimated fiscal impact of at least $25,000 in staff time to research and develop a regulation package to implement this bill. And that's mainly driven by the fact that the bill itself does not have any true kind of contents to it to tell us how we would actually implement that bill. What's more common with what we see on these DCA bills with taking a specific group is more along the lines of expediting. And we've got a pretty clear mechanism for how we do that. And another, and I would say benefit for this program specifically is that we don't have significant backlogs in licensing. So every time we get a new legislative mandate to expedite a specific group or a certain individual, it doesn't really impose much of an impact on staff itself. It's just more of a matter of truly taking the application at the beginning of the day versus the end of the day, or looking at it, a day or two ahead of a different application. It doesn't cause the kind of backlogs that some of the other programs, unfortunately, will see when they have these types of bills. So with that being said, the staff recommendation is to watch it. We would generally look for guidance from DCA as far as maybe a department-wide implementation of the bill. The board could certainly offer comments if it wished, but like I said, I'm not seeing much of an impact other than the amount of staff time it's going to take for us to somehow implement this, just given the lack of real specifics in the bill.
Ms. Walker? Question, I was a little taken aback when I read this. I mean, that is a lot of staff time, and we're already having a problem getting stuff done. And it's a chunk of change. And I feel like our licensing process is so fast. So,
right.
Okay. I think you addressed it, but those are my comments.
So the board could, that's where I'm looking for guidance or more direction from the board before I do something on the board's behalf as far as legislation. This is the type of bill where we could submit a letter, just pointing out the fact that we don't have any backlogs in our licensing applications, and respectfully request maybe an exemption, or respectfully request that they provide more detail on how we would implement the bill so that it would reduce our fiscal impact. Because when we were looking at that Smallwood Cuevas bill, which was the medically underserved areas, that one was much more clear on how you would implement it, because it's like an applicant that provides this evidence would qualify. That's very easy for us to then go in and do, whatever regulation we need to add a question on a form, for them to check yes and then insert, provide us the evidence. There's nothing here on how would you verify or, know that you're going to expedite a specific application, and that's where that cost is coming on staff having to research and figure out how we would even go about doing it. So it's definitely a bill where I don't know, the board certainly, direct me to do that. I'd be happy to, communicate with the author's office and try to see if we can get something either more concrete or, see if we can get some sort of exemption. We were dropped from the Smallwood Cuevas bill. So just another option there.
Well, I like your ideas, but I would leave it to the other board members and get their input as well.
Just a quick
question. Sabina, if I could.
Sorry.
That's okay. You go ahead.
My question was the idea of the cost, is that because the bill is going to expect the staff of a specific board addressing a licensee in background? Is that where the cost comes? Is that the board has to bear that as we research the background of a person? Or is it somebody that has background that comes to us and says, I've had this background, I'd like to be fast-tracked or something to that effect?
This is Sabina. Something to that effect. That's why the fiscal is also kind of rather unknown at this point, because the bill doesn't provide. How do you verify this? For example, the Respiratory Care Board took an opposed, unless amended, I believe, position on this. They also stated that to do all this research, we may not be able to expedite an application because we might have to research so much and verify, and the bill doesn't describe what documentation will be accepted. Is the staff doing this research? We also have, we don't have the ability to collect demographic data. And so we would also need some other law changes with that in order to collect that, And
so Sabina,
we end up with longer wait times.
Yeah. So Sabina, wouldn't this be kind of analogous to, people that are of Native American descent, correct? And they have to have a certain percentage of Native American descent, but they have to provide that information to the school. They can't just go to the school and say, well, my grandma told me I was Native American, so I'd like you to do the research for me. Usually the person knows the tribe that they were attached to and can come forward with some specifics on that. I just think that's I'm inclined to say that we would oppose this like the respiratory until we get some clarification about what research they're expecting our board to do, because for example, my mom was a big proponent of family search, and she spent hours and hours and hours tracking down one family member to a specific area. I mean literally hours and hours and hours. Well, I just think that that was all voluntary. So
yeah, sorry, Dr. Adams. And Sabina, to your point, I mean, the amount of research that we would have to do, they could have been licensed already.
Normally,
I mean, it just
for your board.
It doesn't seem to promote what it should be promoting. In fact, it's going to hinder it. And anyways.
Correct. And that's the rub there, right? The bill doesn't provide that kind of structure for us to go on to even know what would be accepted. I mean, how do you verify what was accepted? I mean, we don't know. Does it have to be some kind of official document? What kind of official document would we accept? Would it be a governmental document? Is there such a thing? There's a lot of unknowns. And so I think that's what the respiratory care board, saw there, that it would hinder the process a little bit more than to do its intention.
Sabina, doesn't like a subcommittee, when these types of bills come forward, isn't there like somebody in a subcommittee that says, yeah, okay, but do your own research before you present a bill that's going to be so blatantly, unclear?
We could wish, right?
Well, listen, I'm thinking about what we've been asked to go through to get a CE package that we implemented 2.5 years ago. We voted on 2.5 years ago to get the regulatory language, but somebody can bring a bill like this that's so, how does that, I don't get it. The standard is so arbitrary. It just seems ridiculous that I don't know. I'm just saying that, if somebody throws a bill out like this, it's almost like they're trying to get their day in the sun rather than really think about how this stuff gets implemented. Excuse my candor, but it's
we're also talking about two different entities, right? OAL and the legislature. We clearly have different standards. OAL, as you hear over and over again from your esteemed reg counsel and your executive officer, they're very picky. We have clarity, necessity, all of these standards. And we've seen a lot, you call them gut and amend bills, right? All of a sudden it starts with something, and then you open your computer the next day and it doesn't even have anything to do with DCA. So I was kind of hoping maybe this is something that might end up like that, only because it wasn't providing a lot of information for us to really implement it. And it was hindering a lot of the smaller boards, already, licensed people pretty fast. But the larger boards would have a hard time with this because they would have to be dedicating staff just for this, and there is a much larger fiscal impact.
Thank you. I've said enough.
Dr. Parrott?
So you don't need a motion to watch it. Of course, the staff will always continue to watch bills that potentially could affect the board. You're going to meet again in July. We might see some kind of changes between now and then. And of course, a lot of other boards have also been taking positions on this. BBS just met last week, and I actually wasn't there for that meeting, so I'm not sure yet what position they took. But those positions are going to start rolling in because at the end of the month, because we have a lot of May meetings.
My suggestion to the board is, if you have the same concerns that are raised, or these concerns that are raised, we could do an opposed unless amended, and just also relay those same comments, just kind of in support of some of what the other programs are doing. We can always watch, but like I said, this is the one where, just like Sabina mentioned, that the fiscal is so unknown because it's like you don't even know what to do with the bill. I would imagine throughout the summer they would actually work on getting something a lot more concrete in place. I was actually a little bit surprised that this bill moved forward. I thought it would get stuck in suspense, but it did not. So, yeah, so that's kind of my update as of today. You may want to consider an opposed unless amended position with the concerns that were outlined during the discussion.
And I believe Dr. Daniels, you had a comment?
Oh, I'm in favor of opposing unless amended because it's just so much work for staff and I mean, just all the points that were discussed. And so I don't know how we move forward, or Dr. Parrish, your thoughts?
Well, I think we can, if we're, I was going to see if we would maybe do these as a slate, but if we're going to change the recommendation from the staff recommendation, then I would entertain a motion. Sabina, does that sound correct?
Yes, it's not really recommended to do the legislation as a slate unless everything is, support or something very standard. Again, we don't need a motion to watch. The issue, well, there's two things you can do. You can also delegate the authority to one of the board members to work with the executive officer on that, on the letter, if you're going to oppose unless amended, or support if amended, or just straight oppose, to work with the executive officer and staff on that letter. So if you oppose unless amended, once the changes are made, the board moves to a neutral position on the bill. So that's always to keep in mind if you want, depending on what you want your stance or your position to really relay to the author's office. You can also just ask the board, to reach out to the author's office to say, hey, you know what, please remove us. Everybody's getting, licensed in a day. And there's really no need for us to be included in this bill, right? And you could do that under no motion, just the watch kind of status. So depends on what kind of position or policy position you really want to take on this bill as a board.
My sense is the board is leaning to oppose unless amended, unless I'm hearing this incorrectly. So I think it might be best to kind of assure that via a motion to take that position.
I know I came across as I did, but I think under the circumstances, it makes probably the most sense rather than get, over our head a little bit as a board, coming out is I would be more in favor of what Sabina said, to watch. And then as we see things develop, have somebody from the board work with Kristen about a letter saying, this doesn't really apply to us. We'd like to be exempt. I think that makes the most sense. Or I don't know if that's something we can say, but since we're so nimble and we do move fast, that maybe it's not necessary for us to necessarily come out right away in opposition.
I think what you stated, though, would be an oppose unless amended position, right?
What's that? Sorry?
I think what you stated kind of defines the oppose unless amended position. Sorry, Sabina.
You could do, it's okay. You could do either. It depends like I was saying, how strong of a position do you really want the message to be? Do you want an official position, or do you want an informal conversation with your EO and the author's office?
Can you do both? I mean, can you start with the informal?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's up to whatever the board feels. They can reach out. They might be amenable to such an exemption. They might also get information that the bill's not going to move forward. We don't know. July is your next meeting, is that correct?
Yeah, we're July 19th.
Is that still time to submit a position?
Still time. It's going to be a little late in the committee process. But like I said, this is one of those impacts where it's like it's going to impact either the entire department, and then we would just mostly follow suit. I know the DCO won't leave us entirely out to figure out every in and out of this bill on our own. Yeah, it is a little.
I mean, and basically the bottom line is everybody would be licensed anyway within a day, regardless.
Right.
Of whether or not this bill goes through or not.
Yeah, just to clarify our licensing times, we're not quite at a day as much as I would love to be. But our licensing times are entirely driven by somebody submits an application, and then it's just gathering the missing pieces of transcripts and their NBCE scores and putting the whole package together, getting their background, and then licensing them. Like when we actually do the breakdown for our quarterly reports, we are really averaging, a handful, under a month. It's like 14 days to get a license when you look at the processing time. So it's already extremely short. That's why it's like there's not much to gain here for us expediting anybody because we don't have backlogs, we don't have delays.
So it sounds like if there's not much to gain, why take like that strong stance if it's already going to be processed? There's two, what I'm clarifying, please let me know if I don't get it correctly, but there's two roads to take, and it's either that oppose and kind of make a big scene about something that could just be watched, and a letter to the author could probably take care of it, sounds like. Or in a very like neutral way of without having to raise any flags on an issue that gets resolved anyway in 14 days.
Right. You're very lucky. Your board is basically expediting everybody. You're very lucky that you can do that. We have other boards who, we're talking 60, 90 days and that's if your application is complete, right? If it's deficient, of course, then that's another story.
But I'd like to watch and maybe letter to the author.
So it just really depends on what kind of message you want to send with, a strong position, or you want to engage in an interactive discussion with the author's office.
I'm more inclined to say watch and see where it goes, and then be ready to write a letter if we see things starting to turn.
July.
Is there any other discussion from the board?
I guess I'm stuck on why can't we write a letter and still watch? Or why do we have to watch and then write the letter?
I think we can do both.
Well, I think Kristen would rather just give a call over to the author's office and have an informal discussion about it.
Yeah.
And that way it's not like on the record of this bill as being, the harsh opposed position, which may or may not, you don't know how it may, I don't want to say it'll come back to bite you, but you really do have to weigh these positions are, can be very important and powerful.
It's more of it signals something. It may signal something intentionally or unintentionally.
Right. And if you can, get to your outcome that you would like in a more informal way, we still have a little bit of time in the season, in the session, to where you can consider this bill again if they don't remove you or don't make some adjustments between now and then.
The optics that we want to keep clean. Okay.
Okay.
I'm inclined for us to keep our discretion.
I agree.
So would it be, is there a preference for there to be a separate conversation, like either like a working session of those who are concerned?
I think,
or just a direct conversation with you?
I would say the concerns are pretty straightforward there. It's like, try to either get an exemption or, relay the fact that, hey, we need more guidance for what we would what this should look like. And both of those can be done through like an informal contact through a call or an email, but not doing, the formal letter goes on the record. And then also generally when you don't have a position, you don't send a letter, you would just do some more informal discussion. So I definitely hear the board's concerns there, and I can relay that.
Okay, and we don't need a motion to direct Kristen to direct staff, because the staff recommendation was watch, right?
Yeah, and they'll be watching all of the bills regardless, so not to worry. And they'll bring up new bills if anything shows up for whatever reason, like anything's got an amended or whatever, but they'll be watching it regardless.
Okay.
So moving to the next bill that we have on the agenda here is 11D, it's AB 3127 McKinner, reporting of crimes mandated reporters. This is about the third or fourth iteration of a similar bill. If it's a little bit deja vu moment, it's because this bill has reappeared a few times. Last year it was AB 1028. Now, that bill didn't move forward. Now it's been repurposed into another bill, AB 3127. And actually, if you recall, looking into the prior legislative session, 21-22, there was also a bill very similar. So this bill, it's passed through the Assembly. It's been referred to the Senate Public Safety Committee and scheduled to be heard on June 11th. The bill is very similar to what we discussed last year, except for they made a few minor changes that I actually think are good changes to the bill. It still provides, so it still replaces the requirement for notifying law enforcement when a practitioner suspects that physical injury has been caused by assaultive and abusive conduct, and instead requires them to make the report only when that injury is life-threatening or results in death, or if it's due to child or elder or dependent adult abuse. It also requires them to make the report if the patient requests that the report be sent. If for some reason the patient didn't want to make the report but requested that their practitioner make it on their behalf, it would again be required to be sent. It has the same language that was in there before about having the practitioner provide brief counseling, education, or other support, and a warm handoff to those when they suspect that the patient suffered a physical injury from domestic or sexual violence, or so providing that counseling, education support, and a warm handoff or a referral to local or national domestic violence, sexual violence advocacy services before the end of the patient visit. As far as on the staff side there, much more controlled fiscal, but we will have to provide some guidance to licensees if this bill is to go into effect. We're anticipating a little under $8,000 as far as staff time for us to get outreach materials up on the website, kind of engage with some of those advocacy services so that basically we have a resource to where if a licensee encounters this type of matter, they can know that if they go to the board's website, it gives you a step-by-step of what to do. So that's where that cost is there. We anticipate that those costs are certainly absorbable within our existing resources. Looking at the budget, we have plenty of money and plenty of staff time there, but what we do anticipate is that it can impact or delay our other outreach efforts and some special projects that we're working on because we only have so many hours to allocate to every project there. As far as the staff position, so the board, when they saw the last bill, took an opposed position. Staff recommendation as of today is you may want to consider watching it. We can relay informal concerns, or if you want to take an official position, maybe an opposed unless amended. So just wanted to turn that back over to the board for some more discussion on this bill.
Any questions, discussion from the board?
Actually, a question. I'd like to, if someone can remind me kind of the reason we selected oppose. Was it just the amount of, what's it called? That practitioners may not be set up for those warm handoffs. There isn't clear direction. Was that the reason that we were opposed?
Yeah, there was a lot of. Sorry.
Yeah, there were a lot of concerns. The main concerns were one, practitioners not necessarily having sufficient training and education to be able to provide that counseling that's being requested by the bill, and then second, incidents of domestic violence or sexual violence are very violent. They tend to be some of the most egregious crimes that you'll encounter. So it's a dangerous situation that the board felt is more appropriately addressed through law enforcement, not necessarily doing a handoff. It was a concern for the patient safety there as well.
If I may add, to Ms. Walker's point, the officers, it's the most concerning situation that an officer can show up to is a domestic violence. It's the most violent, the most dangerous for them. To put a licensee in a situation of without the education, without the background. If you look at just California has a requirement for psychiatry where all these other schools have no requirement for psychiatry. So again, this brings home the point of the particular regulations in California that dictate the particular curricular requirements in California. So if we're trying to take out psychiatry, a semester of it, you take that out and then you're having your licensees be responsible for the health and welfare of somebody that they have absolutely no training at all, not even an introductory class to it. It's extremely concerning for the person that is the victim, for the licensee who has no education, and then the enforcement issues as far as a warm handoff. I mean, you know, the litigation to me, like potentially behind that is not defined. It's very vague. I don't see how this protects the person. And so, I mean, those were some of the points from the conversation. I don't know if Dr. Adams and Dr. Paris have more to that, but those are the ones that I recall.
Yeah, I agree. Those were our concerns. Is it's just arbitrary and kind of nebulous, this idea of a warm handshake and what it opens a practitioner up to who's not really trained in this particular area. I would imagine, you know, Mr. Sweet, you would have, from an attorney perspective, probably could drive a truck through something like a term like a warm handshake. If somebody says, well, I did the warm handshake, that's so open to interpretation. I would imagine it's very nebulous and fraught with potential misinterpretation.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think the burden on a practitioner is so high in this situation, and given, you know, you'd want it to be extremely clear as to what is required of you in a situation like this, and I don't see that here.
Yeah, and the statement, you know, before the end of the visit, and what Dr. Daniels mentioned, and my brother's a police officer, so I've heard stories of these having to arrive on scene for these issues, and to have to do that before the end of the visit, when potentially the abuser is in the office, maybe in the room. You know, I think that brings up a lot of questions about, you know, how does this actually happen, and how do we protect our licensees along with the members of the public, and, you know, do it in a way that's appropriate and safe for everyone involved. So my sense is that we have enough objections to multiple issues in this bill that I would be okay if we left it at oppose. I think it kind of needs to be reworked, you know, like the language just needs to be reworked.
And just one last thing, as Dr. Paris was talking, I mean, I had a staff member who had a very violent girlfriend come to the property, and it's a volatile situation. It's not something that licensees in general are equipped to handle that situation. So you can imagine if you're a doctor and your patient comes to you and you have, you know, that interaction. If you really put yourself in that position of experiencing that violence, the licensee would need just so much education to protect the victim.
Well, not to mention that you're requiring this practitioner to do this all before the end of the visit. You can imagine if a practitioner's in his office or her office, and, you know, a person comes in and does this, their whole day, they have to make sure that they cover all these bases before they can release the patient. They might have, you know, multiple appointments. They'd be canceling. I don't know. I just see that it would be, not that I'm not in, you know, I'm not trying to be insensitive to that. I'm just saying that I just think that that's not really what we're qualified to be doing.
I agree. It's out of our scope.
Now, I hear what everyone's saying. I guess that where I've been on the fence about this particular one that we've seen over and over is just, yeah, my family's been involved in kind of domestic violence, kind of nonprofits in the area. So it's just, you know, bleeding heart here. And so it's like, well, how does it not make sense? So I absolutely hear you in how it is not practical in what to call the execution in terms of how it's written. And that it's, you know, also recognizing there's policy and then there's practice, and that's right. And this is actually getting it into policy, which creates more rigidity if we ever wanted to at least encourage, you know, certain practice. So I hear what everyone's saying. So I'm okay with staying at opposed.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, Ms. Cruz. I think my sense is most of the board is very sensitive and supportive to, addressing these appropriately and assisting the victims as best we can. And, I just think the particular as written language in this bill it raises more questions than, any sort of certainty or even ideas in my mind that this would be actually the right path, and that maybe this, to me, in my view, they could rewrite this language in something more direct and more helpful for consumers and the public.
I just want to clarify, the victim is who I'm thinking of, not the licensee. And if I am not trained, I can cause more harm. I mean, that's my concern. And I'm very empathic, and if we have other we could cause more damage to the person trying to do the right thing if we are not trained. And so that's for me where the language is not clear with the warm handoff, that it doesn't give guidance to the licensee. And I honestly think we would need separate training. I mean, to respond to an emergency situation like CPR, you need to practice it. You need to workshop it. You need to role play that in order that it becomes somewhat subconscious and automatic when that situation is happening. And if that's what we need to do, that's not what we need to do. But that's not what this bill, to me, is saying.
Any further discussion on that particular bill? Okay. Ms. Walker, can we move on to the next bill?
So the board doesn't have an official position on this bill. The board has a position on the prior, so I would just recommend a motion if that's the route that you'd like to take, so that I can relay that information. So who's to close it out with an official motion?
Okay. Okay, I'd be willing to entertain a motion.
Is the motion to oppose the bill? I mean, it's already opposed.
No, the board opposed the prior version of the bill, which was AB 1028. This is, since it's a new bill, just for clarity, if we could just get a motion to oppose AB 3127. Okay, we have a motion and second.
Who made the motion?
I'll make the motion to oppose the current bill. I have 3127, but you're saying, well, anyways, I make a motion to oppose the bill that we're discussing.
Yes. That's correct. Yes.
3127.
That's correct.
Okay.
Is there a second? Dr. Sandino, second. Yeah. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay. Moderator, can we open this for public comment?
Certainly. And so if anyone has any public comment on the motion about Bill 3127, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box and click send. And each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. Any comments? I do not see any request for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
All right. Calling to a vote. Oh, sorry.
Please. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Paris?
Yes.
Dr. Adams? Oh, I will take that as a yes. He was on mute. Jeanette.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Get him to come off mute. Let's try it one more
Yes.
time. Dr.
I'm a
Adams.
yes.
All right.
I apologize. I was
I
talking
saw
with
the
that.
mouth reading.
Gotcha.
Jeanette Cruz, yes. Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Dr. Sandino?
Yes.
Mr. Sweet?
Yes.
All right, motion passed.
Thank you. Okay, I think we can move to the next bill. And just for clarity, because the packet doesn't note are there any others that are new bill numbers that we are going to require a motion on, Ms. Walker?
So that's the only one in here that the board had previously discussed and had a position on a similar bill. These other bills, the board has not, so we have two left, SB 607 and SB 1451. The board has not discussed them yet, doesn't have a position. So the board can either watch or take a position as we get to them.
Yeah, okay, perfect, thank you.
Sure, yeah, I'm sorry about that, I should have clarified that. Okay, moving on to the next bill, agenda item 11E is SB 607, Portantino, controlled substances. This bill is in the Assembly. It's been referred to the Business and Professions Committee. It's scheduled for a hearing on June 4th. So within existing law, a prescriber needs to discuss the risks of addiction and overdose associated with use of opioids, increased use of addiction to an opioid to an individual suffering from both mental and substance abuse disorders, the danger of taking an opioid with a benzodiazepine, alcohol, or other central nervous system depressant, and any other information required by law before directly dispensing or issuing the first prescription for a single course of treatment for a controlled substance containing an opioid to a minor. What this bill would do would be to extend that requirement to any patient, not just a minor, under these same circumstances. And I also wanted to note that a prior version of the bill also would have required that prescriber to discuss the availability of non-pharmacological treatments for pain. Of course, the board is not a prescriber, or none of the board's licensees are prescribers, so this bill has absolutely no fiscal impact on the board, but it's of interest, just given that chiropractors also treat patients with chronic pain conditions. The staff recommendation is to watch. The board could also consider supporting the bill, or even potentially encouraging the author's office to maybe consider putting that language with the discussion of non-pharmacological treatments for pain back into the bill. I suspect that it was taken out for reasons, so probably wouldn't have much luck trying to put it back in there. But if the board did take a support position, you could always point that out in the letter as well. So I just wanted to turn that one over for a brief board discussion.
I'm a strong advocate of that being added back in the language. I think that's a no-brainer, quite frankly, and it should be included in the bill that medical doctors should be discussing with people, that there are other options, non-pharmacological options. It went so far in West Virginia as to that they had to have a 30-day trial with a non-pharmacological practitioner before they could get their prescription, unless it was certain circumstances like post-surgical or something like that.
It's really one of the core tenets of informed consent. You know,
yes,
you run through the alternatives and risks and answer questions, etc. So.
I think we should have a strongly worded letter that says that should be included in this bill.
The staff recommendation was watch. So is there any discussion around our board position on this particular bill and the language?
What I'm hearing is us saying oppose with, what's the word, with amendments, unless there's amendments. Is that what we're saying?
If I could make a suggestion, so there's two, oppose unless amended is usually when the board has a pretty strong opposition to the bill unless they make a fix to it. In this case, there's the requirements that they already have to discuss certain things with minors. This would expand it to all patients. So it's a step in the right direction, but not quite all the way there because it doesn't include that non-pharmacological treatments for pain. So a more appropriate position for the board could potentially be a support if amended, or just a support plus, you know, we still encourage you to take it a step further, just because even if they don't make any changes, it's still kind of on that path. So that's the difference.
I didn't know support if amended was an option.
It is. It's a more rare option. It's not as frequently used, but it's appropriate for a bill like this.
So if the changes are made, the board should
What was that?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you starting to talk, so I just backed off. I'll wait.
Oh, Sabina was about to share something. Yeah.
I was just going to say support if amended. It's similar to what we discussed earlier, but the board moves to then a neutral position if those changes are not made, right? So it depends, again, your message.
And the fact that it technically doesn't include us, right, within its scope.
Right, because
would make sense in that way.
And so the question, I think, to Kristen, you said it used to have non-pharmaceutical in the prior, and then they took it out.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think the chances are of them putting it back in?
That's something where I definitely need to reach out to the author's office and get a little bit more background on why that specifically was taken out. It's very similar language to a Cal Cairo sponsored bill from 2023 that would have done something similar to require, I believe their bill would have required that they make that information available and also, I believe, a referral for that type of treatment. And then that bill didn't move forward. So definitely can get a little bit more information from the author's office, but it's still good public policy, I think, for the board to put forward and just awareness there because, there's more beyond just telling someone the risks of the medication, but there are other options available to them, chiropractic, physical therapy, you name it. So that's kind of the thought behind that, relaying that information to the author's office.
I like that.
I remember that Cal Cairo bill, and I remember we were told that the opposition was that the CMA did not want to oppose it because it jeopardized their licensees, because if they were asked to make a referral to a non-pharmacological practitioner, that they could be liable for that referral. So, but I still think, we don't have to necessarily, say that there's a referral, but I think having a discussion that there are those options and that if they would like a referral that they could, obviously most practitioners, if somebody says, what's this option? Most practitioners that are fair and reasonable would say, well, sure, that's a reasonable option. But I think at least having the language in there, or I don't know what the wording would be, but I think I'm sharing what my position is, that however our wording is, or however we say it, support and amend, or whatever we say, or stay neutral, I think the message should come across strongly that our board supports that when that discussion's happening with everybody, and it should happen with everybody, not just minors, that non-pharmacological options should be in, part of the informed consent, as that's the definition of informed consent, that, that there's risks in different treatments, and there are other options that may be less risk. And you should be aware of those to make a full and informed and complete decision.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. I think it's important to clarify that generally accepted during the process of informed consent, you're not just giving them, you're giving them the plan that you have for them, which is within the scope of chiropractic practice. But the alternatives and the risks, those are, usually other specialties and other options that would be reasonable, including no treatment, but those would be other specialties and other options that are quite commonly outside the scope of chiropractic practice, but you're just giving them the full understanding of what other options would be seemingly reasonable. Of course, that may entail a referral to a provider of that specialty to then have a more focused discussion on the appropriateness for that particular patient. But that doesn't mean that the assumption, the comment I thought I heard earlier was that, well, it's outside of the scope, so that we don't, ever address that. I think you do address that, and that's up to the individual patient and provider to have that informed consent discussion. So from that perspective, and also knowing that opioids, especially the opioid scourge, is one thing that we're all familiar with, but I think the second thing is opioids with benzodiazepines is particularly harmful to patients sometimes, and it's the risk is much higher there, and it's a thing unto itself in healthcare systems, so much so that there's internal guidelines and things like that in hospital systems in the VA, that that help doctors make good decisions there. And so I'm okay supporting it. I'm okay support if amended. I think it's good public health policy, and I think we that should always be something that we look to support. So I'd leave it to the committee if there's any other discussion or motion, et cetera.
If I could just offer one additional point of clarification. If the bill language in itself, where it's like you have the language that they have to have this discussion now with a minor and it's going to expand, you have to have that same discussion with an adult. If that language is, and that's public policy that the board supports, but then of course the board would prefer that it includes on top of that discussion of non-pharmacological treatments for pain, I would recommend that they take a support position, because then your support isn't conditional on them placing that additional item in the bill. So that, just want to clarify that. We would still, of course, relay all of that information and all of that good feedback there, but it's like if the board's support isn't conditional on, adding that, and the board would support it even if that didn't make it in this iteration of the bill, your position would be support. If that support is conditional, then you'd be support if amended as far as the position.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, based on that, I would be, my thought is that I would want to support it.
I agree. I support it.
I agree.
Am I hearing a motion?
So I'll make a motion to support.
Thank you.
SB 607.
Thank
I'll
you.
second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
So if we're supporting, but are we saying anything to put non-pharmaceutical?
Yes, it would be support and then plus relay the importance of, yeah.
Direct staff to communicate with the author's office, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion amongst the board, moderator, can you please open agenda item 11 and particularly the motion to support SB 607 for public comment?
Certainly. If anyone would like to make a comment on the motion and Senate Bill 607, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment, and click send. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. Are there any comments on the motion? I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please. And Ms. Cruz, if you'd please call the roll for the vote on the motion.
Dr. Paris?
Yes.
Dr. Adams?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Cruz, yes. Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Dr. Sandino?
Yes.
Mr. Sweet?
Yes.
All right. Motion passed.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Ms. Walker, I think we can keep going.
Sure. Yeah, we have one final bill to discuss today. That's agenda item 11G, SB 1451, Ashby Professions and Vocations. So this bill, it actually includes a number of different provisions. It's really a cleanup bill for various boards within the Department of Consumer Affairs. But Section 2 of this bill has a problematic provision that would amend Business and Professions Code Section 2054 within the Medical Practice Act to include language that states no person shall use the words doctor or physician, the letters or prefix DR period, the initials MD or DO, or any other terms or letters indicating or implying that the person is a physician and surgeon, physician, surgeon, or practitioner in a healthcare setting that would lead a reasonable patient to determine that a person is a licensed MD or DO. Staff has some concerns with the language as it's written because as the board's aware, licensed doctors of chiropractic also identify themselves as doctor, work in a healthcare setting, And that language there about practitioner in a healthcare setting could include a licensed doctor of chiropractic, but would lead a reasonable patient to determine the person is an MD or a DO is rather vague within that context, because you have the idea of, are they mistaking a DC for an MD? And then when is that determination made? It's also just a little bit redundant because the law itself already prohibits somebody from indicating or implying or holding themselves out as a physician and surgeon. So there's some concerns around that language there. If it was to pass as is, could potentially have a significant fiscal impact on the board's enforcement program. We tend to get quite a bit of referrals, not necessarily from the medical board, but sometimes from even district attorneys' offices about our licensees using the title doctor and having to kind of work through that, and some education around making sure that they've clarified that they're a doctor of chiropractic, or sometimes educating the DA's office on the fact that they're not committing a violation of law. So we already see that. This bill could potentially push that a little bit further. However, within the bill analysis and from the author's office, they're aware of those concerns with, it's not just our board, but other boards that have licensees that also use the title doctor. So there is a discussion on the table of potential amendments in the future that would carve out exemptions for licensees that are acting within the scope of their license and as authorized through their Practice Act. So the staff recommendation for the board is to take an opposed unless amended position on the bill, keeping in mind that we're expecting those amendments to be made. So if those amendments are made to the bill and it clarifies that it doesn't apply to our licensees because we're going to enforce the Chiropractic Initiative Act, then the board would return back to that neutral position. But it would be helpful to have that position in hand in case those amendments don't come to be, so that we can communicate those. So relatively straightforward. The rest of the bill doesn't have anything to do with the board. It was just that problematic provision within Section 2 of the bill.
Thank you. Any discussion amongst the board? I recall we discussed this. Is this the same number as the previous titling? Was that 2 years ago?
That was the Wood bill, and that this is
just different number, new bill, same
idea,
same essence.
Well, it's different because then they're not. And this is different in the sense that they're not hijacking all the medical terminology, but
specialties.
It's still problematic because how does the veterinary board, the podiatrist board, the dentist board, how do all these other boards feel? Because they're anybody that's not an MD or DO is going to be in the same position of concern. I would imagine these other boards would be opposed to this as well. To think that only a DO or an MD can be a doctor.
I would entertain a motion, I think.
Well, I motion that we oppose it unless amended.
I'll second. Ms.
Any
Walker?
further discussion? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry,
no,
Dr.
please.
Ms. Walker, what are the nurses' stance? Do we have any documentation from them as far as their comments on, I assume they're opposing?
I can communicate with the nursing board to find out what their official position, if any, is on the bill. Actually, some of this language is actually, I believe, more intended towards more of like your nurse practitioners and other health providers that are gaining additional scope, and then also using the title doctor with that confusion of where the line is between MD and DO. I think with this language being so broad, though, kind of the unintended consequence is it ends up touching, things like chiropractic, who've historically been doctors in a healthcare setting, since the act originated. So I think they're actually one of the programs that I think is more targeted from that language, is to prevent them from identifying, a nurse practitioner as a doctor, even though they have the DNP within the medical setting.
Yeah, understood. I was just wondering if we had any language that they had written in regards to that.
We do not. What we would be looking for as far as on the amendment would be language to the effect of something to the effect of unless authorized, pursuant to the Practice Act, similar to what we see in Business and Professions Code 2052, where it talks about the practice of medicine and it defines you know, being a felony for anyone that's not a physician and surgeon, practice medicine unless authorized, you know, pursuant to a license with that act. I would envision similar language would fit very nicely here, where it's like it's prohibited unless you're either an MD or a DO or authorized under your own practice act. That's kind of what I would imagine those amendments should look like.
Thank you.
I support that, Kristen. So if that's something that you're planning to communicate to the author of the bill, that I would be in complete support of that.
Any further discussion, questions from the board? We have a motion on the table to oppose unless amended SB 1451. Okay, hearing none. Moderator, can we please open agenda item 11, particularly regarding SB 1451 and the motion to oppose unless amended?
Certainly. If anyone has any comments on the motion, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment into the text box, then click send. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. Are there any comments on the motion about the bill? I do not see any requests for public comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And Ms. Cruz, can you please call the roll for the vote on the motion?
Dr. Paris,
Yes.
Dr. Adams,
Yes.
Ms. Cruz, yes. Dr. Daniels,
Yes.
Dr. Sandino,
Yes.
Mr. Sweet.
Yes.
All right, so motion passed.
Okay, great. Anything else, Ms. Walker?
No, that concludes the legislative items.
Okay. And do we need to open it to public comment for any and all? Anything on the agenda? I think we should.
Whoa. You certainly can, yeah.
Yeah, moderator, can we please open it to any item in agenda item 11?
Certainly. If anyone has any comment on any of the bills in item 11, you may look for the hand icon and click that to raise your hand. You may look for the question mark icon, click that, type the word comment in the text box and click send. Each speaker will have 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. Are there any comments on anything under item 11? And I do not see any requests for comment. Shall I close that feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. I have the time as 11:31. Why don't we take a 15-minute break to 11:46, and we'll continue after it. We'll continue with agenda item 12 at 11:46.